Hi, my name is Rob Nelson and I am the author and creator of Sagelight Image Editor, and in this video what I want to show you is the LightBlender. The LightBlender is something new to version 4, and there are two aspects of it. There's a basic aspect of it, which is what I'm wanting to show you here, and then there's a more advanced aspect which I'll show in another video. When you pop up the power box, which includes the definition sliders and the vibrance, and it also has the LightBlender in it. And what you can do is, what you see here is you see the strength slider, backlight slider, and a couple other controls. And so you can see that there's really just a few controls here, and the only thing to know right now is that there's a shadows layer and a highlights layer. With the LightBlender you get two layers that you can find any way you want, but when the box first comes out, the power box, it's a shadows layer and highlights layer. And right now I just want to focus on the shadows layer. So when I move the strength over, you can see that it brings up the brightness mostly from the shadows, and then as I move the strength slider around, it controls the equalizer. And the nice thing is that it can really give you an idea of how the equalizer works. And what you can do is you can get to a point where maybe I like this brightness, but the real strength of the LightBlender is in the equalizer. That's really the point of the LightBlender, is to blend it any way that you want to blend it. With the equalizer, the left hand equalizer controls more of the shadow areas, and then as you move to the right, it controls more of the highlight areas. You can see it's just really just moving these little light areas here. And so the idea is that I can use the strength slider to get a result, but what I can do is I can then modify what I want. So you can see that because it's brought up the light, it's really removed a lot of contrast, along the cheek line and everything that I might want to keep. And so what I can do is I can start moving these sliders around, and it will let me adjust the light to do whatever I'd like to do. And so what I can do is I can drop it, and you can see now I'm getting that contrast back in there, but I still have a much brighter picture than I started with. And so what the LightBlender lets me do is it really just gives me a lot of control over this image. And what I can do is I can move these boxes over so I can see more of the image that's going on. And as I move the mouse around, it'll just go ahead and give me the window that seems appropriate. And so what I can do is I can move these around quite a bit. And the way the LightBlender is designed, as you can see, I can get something really stark and moody, or what I can do is I can come up and I can get something that's really bright and more like it was taken with a lighter background. And what I can do too is if I get lost with it, I can just go ahead and I can just move the strength slider and it'll put me back to where I was, and then I can continue to move around. And the nice thing is that with the sliders, you can use the mouse wheel. Like right now I'm just using the mouse wheel, and you can see that I have a much finer control. Or you can also use the keyboard, and it'll go ahead and move these around, and you can see that I can just move the keyboard here and I can get a much finer control over it. The best way to use it is with the mouse wheel. I can move the mouse wheel and I can move the mouse over. I don't have to click on the slider, it just selects it for me, and I can really just rapidly move around and choose what I want to do. And so there's something that's a little stark and contrasty, which is nice, but it still has a much brighter it's a much brighter image than the original image, and it has a lot more definition in the face. So with this picture, what I can do is I can do more. I can go ahead and I can move the strength slider like I did before. And what I can also do is I can look at the highlight layer and move the strength slider there and see what kind of things that I get with it. And you can see that I have a deeper picture here. One of the things with the LightBlender is that it was designed to work with the definition slider. So what happens sometimes is that you can get a picture that I like the light level, but it's losing a lot of contrast. And what you can do is you can bring out the radius slider, for example, the definition sliders, and you can start to add contrast. And it's also made to work with the Sagelight vibrance slider, so you can start to add color. But you can see I've been able to deepen the picture, but I've also been able to keep the sharpness to it by using the definition sliders. And it has a reduce halos feature where it's not really happening here. Maybe you can see a tiny bit of a halo there. The definition sliders already work to reduce halos, but you can press the reduce halos button to help it along even more. And so now I have a really different picture. And one of the important things, one of the reasons behind the design of the LightBlender, is that you can do this sort of work. Like, for example, maybe I want to bring the shadows down a bit and play with it, or I want to play with the highlights and bring those down a bit, so I have a deeper picture. And so you can see I have a real deep picture. You can probably tell by my other videos I tend to go for those more, but you can also reduce contrast, and you can do just all sorts of things with LightBlender. But the main thing is that you can see I haven't blown out the highlights and I haven't killed the shadows. And that's typically a very hard thing to do. In a way, that's the core of the LightBlender, is the ability to make all of these changes in all of these light regions while protecting the highlights and protecting the shadows, while at the same time avoiding halos, which is, could be a big problem in image editing. So if I were to continue on this picture, I really like the contrast I got out of it, but I'm not sure I like that it's so shadowy in here. And so what I can do is I can, again, play with the shadow sliders. And the nice thing is that you don't really need to know what's going on internally as much as, once you get used to the idea that this left-hand slider controls more of the deeper shadow areas and the right-hand slider controls more of the highlight areas, you can really start to do a lot of things with your image. And the nice thing is that you can always just press the reset button, and I'm just playing around with the controls. You can see how much you can do with it. You can always press the reset button and start from scratch and reset the sliders and then go from there. So here's a real good image to start with. I can bring this up with various tools in Sagelight. Like that helps bring it up a little bit, and that's usually the best way to go, is to do that and then use the LightBlender to help it along and get more of what you want with it. And so you can see I've been able to already make a bit of a difference with this picture already. And so what I want to do is I want to start with it as it was, just as an example. So what I can do is you can see that I can bring up the shadows and I can play with the highlights. But what I can do too, here's a good thing to do with the LightBlender, is you can move the highlights backwards to get the opposite results. And what you can do is this backlight slider will help you control what's going on there. And then with the black slider, for example, in the power box, you can really start to control things, and you can really start to get a lot of depth to your picture. And a lot of it is really just about experimenting. And so you can see that I have an interesting picture there. Maybe I want to bring it up a bit, but I always like to save room for the local contrast feature. And so you can see I'm really starting to be able to bring it up. And then what I can do is, again, use the sliders. You can see I didn't really use the equalizers yet. And so what I can do now is I can really start to go into the equalizers and really just bring out the brightness to the picture and control the highlights and to do a lot of things with the image. So you can see that I'm really able to see. So you can see that I can really bring up the highlights. I could make this a stark picture if I wanted to, which looks kind of nice, or I can bring it down. You can see I'm really able to control these highlights right here, even with this 5-band equalizer. If you press the Show Pro controls, you can get even more range. And so you can see that I'm just really able to bring that up. And the nice thing about the LightBlender is, let's say I'm going to keep this right here, and I'm going to go ahead and apply this with the apply button. And then what it's going to do is it's going to reset the LightBlender for me. One of the main principles in Sagelight is that, with the power box and with the quick edit controls and the pro quick edit controls, you can do a lot all at the same time. But if you do a certain amount and then you apply the image, it's like you're re-editing it, and then you can do even more. And so now what I can do with this, the LightBlender, for example, you can see that now I'm really able to add even more to it and to add some brightness, again, without really blowing out the highlights. And that's a little contrasty for me, but you see I can just play around with it. And I don't even think I need to use the highlights right now, but I'll go ahead and do that. But once you get used to it, you don't even really need to use this strength slider anymore. What you can do is you can just go directly into the equalizers. And a good way to start is to always just lift this left one and then bring these down, and you'll start to see how you can manipulate the image. And so you can see that I'm really just able to add a lot of brightness to it. And I also want to keep my contrast levels too. And so you can see that between the last time I used the LightBlender and this time, I'm really able to start adding a lot of light to the picture in ways that look nicer. And so you can see that here I'm making kind of a stark picture out of this. So you can see I can just really do a lot with it. I can add some more definition and then add a little color. And so you can see that I have a much different picture than I started with. So now I want to show another example, and in a way it's kind of dangerous territory because there are a number of examples that are very hard to demonstrate. You know, you can take a picture of a plant and make it look better from a technical standpoint, but we all have a different view of how things should look. And pictures like this, portraits, baby pictures, that sort of thing, are definitely the same way. And so, but I do want to show some another aspect of the LightBlender. And so what I can do is I can bring out the controls. And again, you don't have to use the equalizer controls right away. In fact, what you can do is you can use the strength slider to really just get a starting point. In fact, you can just really play around. The strength slider is designed to go through a number of different types of light that you can do, and you can go through the highlights and do the same thing. And so you can see that if I play with the backlight slider, for example, I can get all sorts of different types of results. But let's go ahead and then just do the shadow slider, and then what I'll do is I'll go ahead and bring it up. It's always worth checking the natural setting, which can make a difference. So you can see that it may make it more natural. I don't know. I can go ahead and stick with that. And then what I can do is, let's see, either way. And what I can do is I can bring it down to something that looks good. Maybe I'll click the natural setting. It sets a different type of light blending. And so you can see that I'm really able to just bring out these shadow areas. And I don't want to bring them out too much. You know, you can really start to look unrealistic if you do too much. You know, you want to have a little bit of depth in your picture. But that's where the definition sliders come in. So let's say for the sake of example that I'm going to go ahead and make this kind of even. I don't really like the way this looks that much, but what I can do, because I'm losing definition in the picture because of the light is getting balanced. And so what I can do is I can bring out these definition sliders, and so you can see it's really adding a lot of definition for me. And then I can bring out the vibrant slider just a little bit, and so you can see that I can really play around even more now because I've been able to add that definition. And I think I had mentioned before that, you know, Sagelight, you can have a lot of power, but you can also do things discreetly. For example, I want to back off on right there, looks pretty decent. Let me back off on the definition a little bit because I want to do one thing. What I want to do is I want to apply this as it is, and now I want to use the definition sliders in the same way that I used them before. But the reason I'm putting it into a different step is because something's happening here that happens with a lot of portraits. And what happens is that I can get some great definition in here, but the eyes got darker. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use the undo brush to go ahead and put the eyes back the way they were. And so you can see they come out a little bit more now. I could do some more work to bring out the eyes, but just for this example, I just want to make sure that you can see the before and after. I have a much more depth in this picture, and then I can bring the eyes back and they look a little bit better too. And so what I can do with this picture is I can go ahead and I can add a vignette now to make it a little nicer, and maybe a little saturation or contrast. And then I could keep on going and doing a whole lot more with this picture. I could add even more definition, which I think I actually like. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then I'm going to use the undo brush to just put the definition back where I think I liked it. And so what you can see is that now I have a picture that really in a lot of ways in this area is about as dark, but in another area in the face and in the foreground I have a lot more clarity to the picture, a lot more definition. And then what I can do is I can go ahead and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and bring up the vibrance, but then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just put the clothes back in, just to put in the colors, and so I can leave the skin tone alone. And so there's another thing that you can do with the LightBlender. You know, it's really made to work with the other tools in Sagelight, and you can see that this picture looks very natural now. It doesn't look that different than the original one, except that now I have a lot more light on the face and more depth in the picture.